Once again on making it to the end of the CSS section of this course. You've gone from almost no knowledge of CSS to exactly how to implement it into your pages, and then some really quite advanced CSS techniques involving pseudo classes, layouts, selectors like classes and IDs, and a lot more. So now's your chance to use all of those skills and create something real. The challenge I'm about to set will definitely be the toughest challenge that you've had so far in this course, but I hope that you'll learn the most from it as well. So what we're going to be doing is cloning this page, the BBC News website, and I've chosen the tech page, not because I don't like ASDA, but as an upcoming web developer, you should definitely be keeping up with the latest tech developments. So creating something like this is definitely not going to be easy, but the more effort you put into figuring stuff out yourself, the more you'll learn from it. So one option is to follow along with me as I recreate this page, which is perfectly fine, but I would certainly recommend at least attempting recreating parts of it on your own. You've got all the skill and techniques that you need, and if you've forgotten any or want to try something else, there's always Google to figure out something more advanced. So if you possibly can, have a go at it yourself before you watch the videos and follow along with me. One word of warning, don't necessarily be too fussy. We're not going to use the exact same font, and some of our layouts might not be exactly the same as this site, but it'll be close enough that the layman probably couldn't tell the difference, at least at first glance. One final thing before we begin. Of course, the news on whatever day you're doing this is going to be different to what I'm seeing here. I think that's a plus, and it will give you the opportunity to do something slightly different to what I've done. But if you want the exact same page that I'm going to be working with, then you can jump to completewebdevelopercourse.com/clone. And we're going to be doing it without the cookie message at the top. So this is the exact page, and this is not going to change. I'm going to go as far as about this line here, so where that grey line is all the way along, because I don't think you'll necessarily want to watch me for hours and hours recreating the whole page. We'll just do that top part there. If you want to be super creative, feel free to choose another website to clone, or do this one and then do a different one. But I think the BBC site is a great looking site. You'll learn a huge amount by attempting to copy it as well. One final word of warning, don't attempt to try and recreate the responsiveness of the site. So the BBC website is responsive, which means that it looks different and lays out nicely regardless of the screen width. We're not going to try and recreate that at this stage. We don't have the techniques, but we will be covering them later on in the course. So all you're aiming to do is create something that looks like this. I also wouldn't worry too much about making it look exactly right in every browser. Focus on getting it right in Chrome, and your cross-browser development skills will come along as the course goes on. All right then, so good luck. I hope you enjoy the challenge. And when you've done it, do come back and watch me give it a shot. Okay, here we go then. So I'm going to start by creating a new page. So I'm going to do that within brackets. So we'll go to File, Save As. You obviously do it in your text editor. And then I'll just call it bbc.html. Save it there. And then we'll get rid of the style from the previous video, and we'll change the title so that that matches technology-BBC News. So I've just copied that from up there. And then let's jump over and change this so that we're looking at the right page in our browser. Okay, and a quick check is always good. There we are. And we've got the right website title as well. All right then, here we go. Deep breath. I'm going to essentially start from the top left and work my way along. And that bar at the top definitely looks to me like a good place to start with a div. Definitely, that's a section of the page which is different to everything else. So let's start there. And we'll create our div. And I'm going to give it an ID of top bar. because it's the bar at the top of the page. Now, it's got a white background, or at least it looks white to me. I'm going to use the color picker just to check that it is. Yes, it is. So all those Fs in the middle are a complete white, so I don't need to give it a particular background. What I do need to do is center it. So you can see there it's got a fixed width, but it is centered in the page. So as far as my clone is concerned, I could forget that centered bit, but I would quite like to do it. So let's have a quick Google to see if we can work out how to center a div within the page. Oh, there we go. Center div in page. That looks good. That takes us to stackoverflow.com. If you haven't discovered stackoverflow.com yet, then you haven't been Googling enough to work out how to do things, because it comes up all the time. It's a great site. So it looks to me that we can center our div by giving it a fixed width and then setting the margin to 0 and auto. So that's going to be a 0 margin at the top and the bottom and an auto margin on the left and right. So that should center it for us. Great. So let's do that. So for our top bar, we're going to use hash and then top bar, and we'll experiment a bit with the width. I think about 1,000 pixels is likely to be about right. And then, as we saw, we want margin 0 and then auto. And I'm actually just going to give it a temporary background color so that I can see how wide it is. And I think we'll need to give it a height as well. So we'll experiment with that. My guess would be around 40 pixels. Okay, let's take a look. So there we go. Excellent. So I think that looks good. It's about the right width and height, but we do have this bar at the top there, which I want to get rid of. We did see how to do that a few videos ago. I wonder if you can remember. It's just a matter of setting the body margin and padding to 0. So that should now align it to the very top left. There we go, or to the very top anyway. Left only if it happens to be smaller than 800 pixels. Okay, so now we can get rid of our background color. And the first thing we're going to want is this BBC logo. So I'm just going to steal it directly from the page by right-clicking or control-clicking and then save image as. Then I'm actually going to create a new folder called images. You don't have to do this, but it's quite a neat way of keeping all your images separate from your HTML files. And I'm going to call this BBC logo. Okay, so now we've got BBC logo.png. So let's pop it in and see what it looks like. So we add an image using img, and then we want src, and it's going to be in images / and I even get that nice auto predict there. Brilliant. Let's take a look. Fantastic. So I'm very happy with that, but it is at the top of the page and we want it down slightly. So I'm going to give it a margin at the top. So let's give it an ID of logo. It's definitely an ID because there's only one logo. And then with the logo, I want to set a margin top of, let's say, 5 pixels. Let's have a look at that. Okay, I think we could make it a little bit more than that, maybe 8. Remember, we're not worrying about purely pixel perfect here, but that looks about right. It's definitely a bit smaller by default as well, so I'm going to stretch it out a bit. Let's try giving it a width of maybe 120 pixels. Okay, a little too big. Let's try 100 pixels. Okay, that looks about right to me. All right, so now we've got our logo. The bit to the right of here, we want a nice vertical border there. And we've actually got those to separate out each of these. So I'm going to create a class for those with a border on the left. So we'll need to float the logo to the left because we're going to want to put other things to the right of it. And then let's create this sign in div. So we're still inside the top bar here. And we'll call it sign in div. There we go. Now we want it floated left and we want it with a border to the left. And we're going to want that for all of the top bar sections here. So I'm going to create a class of top bar section. And then I'm going to assign those styles to that. So we want them all to float left. And we want this border left. And let's try 1px gray solid. See how that looks. And there's nothing there. That's interesting. I suspect that's because we don't have a height yet. So let's make it a height of 100% so it will completely fill the top bar. And there we go. So now we can see it. It needs a bit of work. So I think I'm going to add a margin to the right of my BBC image. So that's logo here, just to spread that out. And let's have a look. How wide do we want this to be? About the same as the distance from the top. So let's try a margin right of 8 pixels. Okay, that looks pretty good. We haven't got the color right though, so let's use our color picker to pick a color from the page and then try and isolate the color that we want. It's pretty tricky to do at this scale, so I'm going to zoom in as much as I can, and we can see that it's 1 pixel here. It's tricky to get it just right, but I think it's that CCCCC there. That looks like the right sort of grey to me. So let's jump back and change the border color from grey to hash CCCCCC. Let's take a look. Okay, that looks much better. Great, I'm going to fix the height later on because I want to put some content in first. So let's zoom out again. So we've got two things here. We've got this image and then we've got the sign in text. So let's zoom in. And if we right click on this image, you'll see that we can't actually download it directly. So I'm actually going to use the screen grab tool on the Mac, which is Command Shift 4. And that will allow me to select the image and save it to my desktop. If you're on Windows, you can use the snipping tool to do the same thing. Or if you have problems with that, you can always download it from the zip at the end of this section, which gives you the whole of my version of the BBC page. So I'm going to go back over to Finder, and there's the file. So it's a screenshot and then the date and time. I'm going to change that to sign in image. And then I'm going to copy it to the clipboard and pop it in my images folder. There we go. So now let's jump back over and add that in. So we're going to put this in the sign in div, and it's an image with an src of images and then sign signinimage.png. There we go. Okay, let's have a look. All right, so we've got it. It's a little larger than we need. So let's give it an ID of sign in image and then use a bit of CSS to customize that. So we'll create a sign in image selector and then we'll set the width. Let's try 10 pixels. Ooh, a little bit small. 40 pixels, a bit too big. 30 pixels. We zoom out again. I think that looks about right. We want the same kind of height as the BBC logo, so I like that. And we'll need some margin for it as well. We want a top margin and a left margin. So let's see if we can do a margin all the way around. Let's try 8 pixels. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think that is about right, although the left margin is actually a little bit more. So I'm going to change that. So we've got 8 pixels at the top and maybe 15 pixels on the left. Let's just have a look at that. There we go. I think that looks a little better. It's maybe a bit large. So let's make it slightly smaller. And give it more of a margin at the top. Okay, that looks better. Touch more margin at the top, I think, bring it down a little bit. Brilliant. Okay, so next bit is this sign in text. So we're going to need to change the font and make it bold. So let's add in that. Just make sure I get the capitalization right. So it's sign in with a small I. There we go. Okay, so we definitely want to float this image to the left so that it's to the left of our sign in text. So let's just add that in. That's better. And now let's get this font right. Now I'm going to show you a little trick. I think we'll use the same font throughout. So if we select a certain bit of text, right click or control click in Chrome and then inspect, this will give us a bit of information about that particular text. And the computed section is particularly useful because it gives you a bit of information about that text. So that can be really handy. We're going to particularly focus on the font family. There we go. So the font family is something called Helmet. I think I'm going to go for just this last bit here. So Helvetica, Arial and Sans Serif, because I suspect these ones are custom fonts for the BBC site. So let's see if we can change the font, and we're going to want to change the font for pretty much everything. So let's do that within our body tag, and we want to set the font family to Helvetica, Arial and then Sans Serif if we can't get either of those. So let's have a look. That should change the font of our sign in. Fantastic. So I think this can be a span, because it's not quite a paragraph on its own. So we'll call it sign in text. And we don't need to do a lot with it. We need to make it bold, maybe change the size and then move it down a touch. I'm actually looking at the sign in image there. I think it should be slightly higher. See if that looks better. So Let's take our sign in text selector and we want font weight bold. I'm going to make it a touch smaller. Font size, let's try 90%. And then let's try moving it down around 11 pixels. Okay, I'm liking the size and font weight. It's not liking my margin top though. So I suspect that's because it doesn't want to apply a margin to a span. So let's try doing it with positioning instead. So we'll give it a relative positioning with a top of 11 pixels, sorry. There we go, that looks good. So it's moving down. I think we need to move it a bit further. 15 pixels. Slightly too far. 14. Okay, I'm liking that. Okay, that looks pretty similar. You'll notice that there is this nice color that appears on mouse over here. We're not going to be recreating that. We don't have the skills for that yet, I'm afraid. If you want to check out how to do that with JavaScript, then feel free. It's not too tricky, but it's definitely beyond our abilities right now. Next then, we've got this slightly strange wiggly line there. I'm going to use Command-Shift-4 again to take a screenshot of that. I'll try and get it as accurately as I can. And I recommend doing the same thing with the snipping tool down to the bottom. And while I'm here, I'll do the same thing for the bell. There we go. So let's find those. There they are. So I'll rename this one bell. And I'll call this one wiggly line. Now you can see I've copied some of the top of the screen there. If you're on a Mac, there's an easy way to fix that. You can just double click on your image and then zoom in and select the bit that you want to keep, and then use Command K to crop, and then you're left with just the bit that you want. So that's really useful. You'll need to use an image editor if you're on a PC to do the same thing, or you could just use the images in the zip file at the end of this section if you'd rather. So let's select wiggly line and bell, and then copy them back into our images folder. All right, so our wiggly line is going to go somewhat to the right of sign in there. So I think it deserves its own div. Which is going to be here. So we're still inside top bar, but we're not in sign in div at the moment. I'll call this one bell div. There we go. And then the first thing that we're going to want in our bell div is our image, which is going to be our wiggly line.png. So let's just have a little look about that. Okay, that's fine, but it's obviously a little bit large. I suspect we'll need to mess around with that later, but let's just give it a height for the moment. I'll give it an ID of wiggly line, which is probably not the sort of professional sounding ID that you'd want to use in a final page, but it will do for our purposes. So wiggly line. We're going to want to float it left, and let's give it a height of, well, for now we can put 40 pixels, which is the same height that we gave the top bar originally. So that will do for now. We might need to perfect it when we've got everything in place. Obviously it's pretty close to sign in there. So what I'm going to do to fix that is give my sign in text span a right padding of, let's say, 50 pixels. See how that looks. Okay, I'm happy with that. I think that's about the right sort of distance along. Great. Now we're going to bring in our bell. So that's just going to go next to our wiggly line. So image, we'll call it bell, src is images, and then bell. Let's have a look. Okay, great. Happy with that, but obviously we need to make it a little bit smaller. So let's try a height of 15 pixels. See how that looks? Oh, a little bit too small. Maybe 25 pixels. Okay, yep, I like that. And then let's give it a margin. So let's try a top margin of around 12 pixels and a left and right margin. Let's do it about the same, 12 pixels as well. Okay, that's definitely a little bit too much. Maybe 10, maybe 9. Okay, that'll do, and it's a little bit far from the wiggly line as well, so let's make that 10. Maybe still too far. Try 8. Okay, we can play with that and see how it looks. Now we're going to have our relatively easy bits, hopefully news, sport, weather, iPlayer, etc. So let's bring in a new class for those. So after the bell div, I did float the bell div left, did I? No, I didn't. So let's do that. There we go. So that means that everything will be to the left of it. Now these ones I think don't need a specific ID because they're all the same, but they will need a specific class. In fact, they might need 2 classes. They all have a margin left and they're all going to be floated left. So we can use the top bar section class for all of them. There we go. And then that first one there is just news. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so it looks fine, but I think we're going to need to make it bold, maybe a touch smaller, and we're going to need to add some margins to it. So let's call this top bar menu as well. So we've got 2 classes. And then specifically to top bar menu, we'll have a font weight of bold and a font size of, let's try 90%. We might not need it. And then we'll have a margin of, what did we have before? Actually, what worked for the sign-in text? 14 pixels. Let's try that. And we'll try 15 left and right as well. Okay, yes, I didn't mean margin. I definitely meant padding. Okay, so yeah, we're getting there. We've got much too much left margin there, and I think we need to move it up maybe just a touch. Let's try 13 pixels there. 15 pixels, and let's have 0 padding at the bottom, but then keep our 15 pixels on the right. See how that looks. Okay, that hasn't helped our problem with our line, so let's try specifying a particular height. Remember, the height is going to be plus the padding. So if we want the whole height of this thing to be 40 pixels, then we need to take away the padding at the top, which is 13 pixels. So that leaves us with 27 pixels. So let's have a look. Okay, that looks a lot better. Great. We might have to fiddle around with that a little bit later on, but that looks good enough for now. All right, so now we've got some easy bits. We just need to add sport, weather, iPlayer, TV, and more. So let's do that by copying these divs. So see if I can remember them. Sport. Nope, I can't. Sport, weather, iPlayer, TV, and more. There we go. Let's have a look. All right. I think for the first time it's starting to take shape. I'm liking that. We do need a little down arrow there. We're not going to bring in this fancy menu there, but I will put the down arrow in. I suspect we'll need to do a little screenshot of it. That should be fine. There we go. So same as before, if you can't get that for whatever reason, then just grab it from the zip at the end of this section. So there's the more arrow, and let's bring that into our images folder. There we go. And then that's just going to go after more. So let's bring that in. Image with a source, and then images, more arrow. There it is. So we want it moved along a little bit, and of course the right size. So I'm liking the position, actually. That works quite well. So give it a more arrow ID. And then I think we need to change the size first of all. So let's try a width of 6 pixels. And we definitely want a margin left of, let's say, 15 pixels. Oh, definitely a little bit small. 16 pixels. Okay, yeah, that looks better. And maybe 20 pixels there, space it out a little bit. Great. All right, so that's looking good. Let's jump back over and see what we need to make next. So all we've actually got left in this top bar is this search box here, which is going to be a text input with a little bit of styling to get that image in the background. All right, so let's see if we can pull that off. We definitely need a new section. So let's create a new div with a class of top bar section. And then we'll start off just by putting an input with a type of text and seeing how that looks in itself. Okay, so we've got the input, but that's not quite what we're after. So let's do a little bit of work to try and make it look like that. So we're going to need to make it wider. We're going to need to set the background to that grey color. There it is. And we're going to need the magnifying glass image. So while I'm here, I'm going to use Command-Shift-4 again. You can use the snipper tool if you're on Windows. And I'm just going to copy that to the desktop. And there it is. So I'll call it magnifying glass. And then I've just copied it again, so Command-C or Control-C, and I'm going to paste it into the images folder with all our other images. There we go. So let's start by putting it about the right shape and size and that background. I think I've just lost the background color again. There we go. So I'll grab it again to the clipboard. So let's give this an ID of search box, and then create some styles to make it look how we want. So we'll start off with a background color, as that's in the clipboard. And that's going to be that number there. So that looks about right. We don't want any border here. So I'm just going to put in border none. Okay. We definitely want it a little bit taller than it currently is. But we might achieve that with padding. Let's have a look at just putting some text in there. So we definitely want to style that text a little bit. Try bold font weight first of all. And I think a little bit bigger. Yep. So let's try a font size of, start off with 14 pixels. I think that looks about right. And then we'll have a little bit of padding. Try out 5 pixels. Okay. I'm liking that. I think that's about close enough. We then definitely want a bit of margin. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think that's about right. You can obviously play with those depending on how much of a perfectionist you are. All right, so just before we add that image in, let's have another quick look at how it actually works. If we take a look at this search box here and drag the mouse over, we can actually see that the image is separate to the search box itself. So what we actually want to do is get our image to appear on the right of the search box. And it will be nice to do it in such a way that clicking on the magnifying glass does the actual search for us. Obviously, we're not going to create a functional search engine here, but we can do that last bit quite easily. So let's see how we achieve that. Our default way, if we just had an image, would be just after the input to have an image with an src of images and then magnifying glass. And we'll give that an ID of magnifying glass. There we go. And we're going to need to add a float left to the search box to make that float nicely. And then for now, let's just leave that blank and see how that looks. Okay, so we've overlapped our 800 or so pixels. I think that's fine. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And we're also going to want to remove the margin from the right of the search box as well. So let's change our margin to 5 pixels and then 0 and then 5 pixels. 5 pixels. And that should remove that margin so they're nice and together. Now I'm not happy with the coloring there. It doesn't seem to match up. So let's try that again. Just grabbing the right color. Doesn't seem to be working too well for me here. Okay, let's try that. E4, E4. Okay, that's a lot better. Excellent. So let's get this height right. Start off at around 15 pixels. Okay, that's handy. We're now in the right range. but we need to make it a little bit bigger. So let's go for 25 and let's add a margin top of 5 pixels as well. Okay, now we're looking good. So I think we need a couple more pixels in the height. Let's go for 27. There we go. Okay, that looks great. Now, what we can't do at the moment is what I mentioned earlier, which is click on that image. But I'm going to show you a nice and easy way that we can do that. All we need to do is change our image to an input with a type of image. And then that will make it clickable. And if we had a proper form there, that would actually submit the form as well. So you can see that that's now clickable and effectively does the same thing as a submit button. Of course, we don't have a form here. It won't actually submit, but if it did, we would. So that's as far as we're going to go on this video. Our top bar is now more or less complete. In the next video, we're going to create the news section there in red and then the menu underneath. I hope you're staying with me and that you're learning a lot at the same time. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so we're making good progress on our clone. So far, we've pretty much covered the top bar at the top. So our challenge in this video is going to be to recreate the dark and lighter red section of the header here. Now you can see that we've got the red and darker red bars extend right to the edge of the screen, whereas the content has the same width as before. So we're going to need an outer div which has a width of the whole screen, and then an inner div which has a width the same as the top bar that we created up there. So that should be pretty straightforward. It would definitely be worth clearing our floats to make sure that everything appears below the top bar here. So let's have a special div to clear everything. We're probably going to be using that more than once. So I'll create it as a class, and we just want to clear both floats. Not that we've got any right floats at the moment. And then I'm going to call this the menu bar, for lack of a better phrase. So I'm going to start with an ID of menu bar container. So this is going to be the full width div for this lighter red background. So let's just try and get our red color first off. That looks good. And then, what did I call it? Menu bar container. There we go. So we want a background color of that and a width of 100%. Let's have a look. Oh, we could do with a height as well. Let's try 100 pixels to start off. That's better. Okay, so we're looking pretty good already. In terms of height, I think that's a little bit high for just that top part there. So let's go for something like 70 pixels. Great. Then we're going to need our top bar, our menu bar, div to go within that. And that's going to be pretty similar, but we want it centered and to have a width the same as the top bar at the top. So let's go right back. Remember, we had 1000 pixels and a margin of 0 auto, which should give us the layout that we want and make it nice and centered as well. So in terms of content, we would just want the word news there. So I think I'm going to use an H1 for this. There we go. So the text is there. Got some strange padding coming in, and we definitely need a little bit of styling as well. Now, we're only going to have one H1 on our page, so we don't need to give it a class or an ID. I think we definitely want to take away any padding or margins. So let's set padding and margins to 0 for now. We might want to put some back in again. We definitely want it to be white. And I think we want it to be a little bit larger than it is now. So let's try a font size of 40 pixels. See how that looks. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. I think we actually don't want it to be bold. So let's set the font weight to be normal. Great, that's looking better. It's not quite the same font, but it's close enough. But we do want a little bit of a margin at the top, I think. So we'll set margin top to be, that's too much. Maybe 10 pixels. Let's have a look. Now that's moved down the whole bar, which is not what we want. So let's switch that to a padding at the top. That's better. Okay. That's pretty good. Pretty close to what we've got there in the real thing. Fantastic. So now we just need to have our find local news link and that image there. I wonder if I can get it. No, not easily. Okay, so while I'm here, I'll do my screenshotting trick. And then let's jump over and copy that image. I'll call it a pointer. There's probably a better name for it, but that will do. Copy it into our images folder. Great. Okay. So we want a little box there and a link inside with our image to the right of it. So I think I'll use a div for that. Pop it after news, but this is going to be inside menu bar. So div ID equals, and let's remind ourselves what it actually says. Find local news. So let's call this local news. And the text, before I forget it, is going to be find local news. Let me just check the capitalization. Oh, all lower text, all lowercase, I mean at the beginning. And then we're going to want our image. And I called it pointer. Okay, let's have a quick look and see what that looks like with no styling at all. Needs a bit of work. All right, no problem though, we can handle this. So first off, we need to get that H1 to float left. In fact, we could possibly do without that, because what we're going to do now is get our div, which was called local-news, and we'll get that to float right. There it is. So we don't actually need this to float left. It's not going to cause any problems, but let's get rid of it. Always good to keep the code simple. So I'm actually going to just get rid of the float right temporarily so that I can see what I'm working with here. I have to make the browser window bigger and smaller every time. But in terms of, we want it white, quite large, and centered with a small gray box around it. So let's have color white. We do want it to be a link as well. So a href. I'll just leave it blank in terms of its destination. Not too worried about where it goes. Close that there. Now that's good, but it hasn't made our link white. And we're going to access that by using local-news and then A. And that will then style all the links within local news. So if we now have a look at that, we don't actually need that style. And there we go. So it is white, but I'm just going to temporarily pop back my float left into the H1 so that I can see it all there. That'll make it a lot easier to develop. Okay, we want to get rid of that underline. So text decoration none, but we want to bring it back in on hover. So local news A and then the hover pseudo class as we've seen before. Bring back the underline. So let's have a look at that. Lovely. All right, we need it a little bit bigger. So let's try a font size of 15 pixels. Ooh, too small. 25 pixels. Ooh. Don't forget pixels. There we go, a little big. Maybe I was right all along with my 15. No, that is definitely too small. Somewhere in between. 20, that looks about right. All right, now the link is definitely a little bit low down. So let's use a bit of positioning to move it back up again. So relative positioning, and then we'll set the top to, let's try out minus 20 pixels. That'll move it upwards. Okay, that looks pretty good, but let's try maybe 17. I like that, that looks more centered. Brilliant. And now let's style the image. We just need to make that a bit smaller really, and possibly change the position. We could give the image a particular ID, but slightly more fancy would be to take our local-news and then style all the images within it. And there's only one, so that saves us having to create another ID for our pointer there. So let's change the height to be, let's try 20 pixels. Ah, it's a little small. Ah, this has affected our link as well. So we probably won't need our relative positioning there. That's interesting. So let's use 30 pixels instead. Still a little small maybe. Let's go for 40. Okay, brilliant. So I think that's about the right size. Find local news is now a little bit out of whack. So let's move it down a touch, not that much. We want it to be roughly centered with the image. So about that should do. And then we want our box round the find local news. Which should be fine. Let me see if I can get that color just right. I'm not finding my color picker to work that well at the moment, but let's see what we can do. So there's the dark red. And that, I think, is the lighter red. Let's give it a go. So let's set the local news div to have a border of 1 pixel, that color, solid. Okay. That's about the right color, I think, but it's definitely extended further than we'd want there. Let's have a look and find out why. I think it's because we need to introduce our float. So that's now float. Let's see if we can get away with floating left temporarily. And we'll want to set a fixed width as well. So let's go for something like 200 pixels. Okay, good. So that now gets the border roughly how we want it. The width is a little bit wide. So let's go for 180 pixels. Great. I think we need a little bit of padding on the left and right, and maybe a touch on the top to bring it down a little as well. So let's go for 5 pixels at the top, and then 5 pixels on the right. Let's try 0 on the bottom and see what effect that has. And then 5 pixels on the left as well. Okay, I'm liking that. I think maybe a touch more on the left. Let's try 10 pixels. Excellent. I think that looks good. Now all we need to do is bring it down a little. So we'll do that with a margin. So at the top, let's try 5 pixels again. And then we're going to want a margin right of, let's try around 10 pixels. And we're not actually interested in bottom and left margins because we're going to float it to the right. Okay, let's have a look. There it is. Fantastic. So it's not identical to that, but it's pretty close. I think we can make the text a little bigger, and it'd be nice to align the bottom of the text with the bottom of that image there as well as it is here. So let's just do a little bit of playing around with that. If we can, we'll float it left again so that we can see it more clearly. There we go. So we want the font size to be maybe 60 pixels. If that's not too much. Oh, that's the wrong one. Font size, let's try 30. That's a little large. 26. Okay, I think that looks about right. We'll then need to increase the width. Let's try 190, it's too narrow. 200, still too narrow. 210, still too narrow. 220, excellent. That's better. Now that I can see it there, I think I want it even bigger. So let's go for 30 and 240. 250, there we go. Okay, so that looks good. Maybe we don't need to move it up at all anymore. Let's have a look. Maybe it will position itself. No, it's still too low down without that repositioning. So let's try moving it up 5 pixels, a little bit more, 8 pixels maybe. There we go. Excellent. I like that. So let's just change the float from left to right. I think that looks pretty good. One thing that you may have noticed that we're lacking though is this grey bar here, which adds a nice border between the top bar, as we're calling it, and the top bit of the menu bar here. So let's add that in. And we also need to make sure our lines line up with that. So this is where it comes in. It has to be pretty pixel perfect. So we can use our local news container, I think, for this, or our menu bar container, sorry. And we'll give it a border top of 1px solid, and we definitely have that color already because we used it on the left of the top bar menu. So where's the border left? There we go. That's what we want. So let's pop it there. Notice it doesn't actually matter what order we put these three in. You can put the width and the type and the color in any order you like, and it'll still work it out. Great, so now the bar is there, which looks really nice, but those things aren't quite in contact with it. So let's figure out why that is. First thing to try might be to decrease the height of the top bar slightly, which might move everything up. Nope, that's no good. So let's keep that at 40. Let's just try setting the margin and padding to 0. Nope, that's not it either. So I suspect that it's something to do with one of these divs being taller than the rest. And the only one that doesn't have a left margin is this bell one, because that's got the image as the left margin. So let's just test out our theory by removing the bell div temporarily. Aha, now that moves everything up beautifully. Okay, so the bell div is definitely our problem. Let's have a look. Probably that's a little bit too tall. Okay, we've got our margin here. So 9 pixels, 8 pixels. All right, so let's try changing the bottom margin to 0. And we'll keep the left margin at 8 pixels. See if that does the job. There we go. Very nice. So now everything links up beautifully and things are really starting to take shape. Great. So now let's have a look at this menu bar down here. So that's what we're trying to create next. You can see first off that it's got a different red to the bar above. So let's just get that red copied to the clipboard. And create some new divs for us. So we're now outside the menu bar. I'm actually going to call this very unoriginally menu bar 2. And then add some styles for menu bar 2. And the main one is that we want the background color, to be that. But we also want it to have a width of 100%. And that's actually not menu bar 2, it's menu bar 2 container. Just like we had before. So we'll set that to be menu bar 2 container, and then within that, we're going to have div ID menu bar 2. And this is where our menu will be contained. And all we'll need for that is a width of 1000 pixels and a margin, as we've seen before, of 0 and auto. And that will give it a margin 0 top and bottom, but auto left and right, which will make it nicely centered for us. And let's give it a height as well. So let's try something like 30 pixels. All right, let's take a look. Aha! So everything's good, except it's not quite positioned where we wanted it. Why is that? It's because we haven't broken our floats. So before that, let's add a div with a class of clear. And that should clear both our floats and move it down underneath where it belongs. Brilliant. So now we're going to want a string of links, all of which are going to be styled the same. So I'll start with the first couple, home and UK, and once we've got those right, we should just be able to add the others in. So we want them pretty big, white, and we want to have this border there as well. So let's have an A. Again, we'll have a blank href, and this will be home. And then the same for the next link, which I've forgotten already, UK. There we go. So let's see what they look like without any styling. All right, not great. So again, we can style these using menu bar 2 and then A, and that will style all of the links within menu bar 2 the same. So let's set the color to white first, and we want no underline, so text decoration none. We want a bit of a margin at the top, Let's try 5px. And we want some padding left and right as well. So we don't need any padding top and bottom, but let's go for 10 pixels padding on the left and right. And finally, let's add our border right. It's going to be 1px solid. And I think it's the same color as the border around the bit that we can't see anymore. Find local news there. Or at least it's close enough. So let's use the same border as we did for local news, which was this one. BB4545. Okay, let's take a look. That's not bad. I think they could do with being slightly bigger. And my margin top obviously hasn't worked out there. So I'm going to use font size. Let's try 14 pixels. And let's use positioning to shift them down a bit. Okay, that's actually made them smaller. Let's try 18 pixels. Okay, I think that's about the right size. And I think we could make the menu bar itself a little bit bigger and then move them down a little bit more. There we go. I like that. Maybe a teensy bit less. Okay, great. So I'm pretty happy with that. There's something slightly strange going on with the padding here, I think. But let's add a few more and it might become clearer what that issue is. So we've got, I wonder if I can copy and paste. No. Okay, no problem. Let's just add them in. So I'll just add a few blank links there. So we've got world, business, politics, tech, science, health, education, entertainment and arts, video and audio, and more. Okay, let's take a look. We'll sort out the more triangle later on. Okay, so this is good. We have a problem with our font size, so let's make that font a little bit smaller. That's easy enough. Try 16, still a little bit too big. So let's try 14, okay. That's about right, and then let's move them down a little. Keep them centered. Whoops, wrong way. 1 pixel less, I think. Great. Now I'm going to bring in the underline on hover, which I know is not quite the same as what the BBC site does, but it'll be close enough. There we go. We need JavaScript to get this to appear anyway. All right. So all we need to really do now is add the down arrow. And of course, we want to get rid of this margin on the more link. So let's do both of those. First off, I'll do my screenshot. And remember, you can use the clipper tool if you're on Windows to do that, or Command-Shift-4 if you're on Mac. And there it is. So I'm going to call it down arrow and then copy it and put it in the images folder as before. Brilliant. So let's edit that. First off, we're going to need to get rid of the border on the final more link. So let's give that a special class, which I'll call no border. And then we can have a no border class which has border none. So let's just have a look, see if that's worked for us. It hasn't. That allows us to use a special trick of exclamation mark and important. And let's just make sure you can see that that's worked. So that's a really handy little trick that you can use when you've got potentially clashing CSS instructions. So here we're telling every menu bar 2A item to have a border on the right, and here we're telling everything with a class of no border to have no border. So how does the browser know which one to do? If you want to be completely clear on it, then you use exclamation mark and important, and it will make sure that this one has a priority over anything which is not important. So that's a handy little trick. Okay, that's great. And so all that remains then for this bar is to add in our image. So images and then down arrow. There we go, right, a little bit too large. So let's give it an ID of down arrow. And then we can fix all of that. All right, so it's there. It's a little large, little high up there. And it's shifted everything down as well. So let's try a height of 10 pixels. And let's shift it down a little bit using positioning. So we'll give it a top of, let's try 10 pixels as well. Just see what that looks like. Oh, as it happens, that looks pretty perfect. I like that a lot. Wonderful. So that's our menu bar complete. In the next video then, we'll go and look at the left part of the main section here. So we'll do our technology link up there, and then we'll have a bit of content and out. We've got our top bar up and running, and that fits nicely with our menu bar as well. We've got our two shades and all our menu links are set up beautifully. So in this, the third video of the BBC News clone, we're going to be recreating essentially this box here, the left part with technology at the top, and then bottom right, we've got this big image. So let's start as always at the top left and work our way down. So this technology with the red underline isn't actually a link, which is slightly odd, but ours is not a reason why. Ours is to recreate. So let's get things moving. We're out of the menu bar 2 container div now. So we're going to need a clear. So let's set that up. There we go. And then we'll have an ID of, we'll call it main article, because that's what it seems to be. So we definitely want to set a width for this main article, and we want it to float left, because we're going to have another section on the right there, which is going to float right. But the width of the whole section, again, is the same as the whole page. So let's actually create a container, which once again is 1000 pixels wide and centered. So let's have a div. I'll call it page container because it would actually contain the whole page if we were going to write the whole thing. So page container is same as what we've seen before, which is to say it's 1000 pixels wide and it's got a margin 0 at top and bottom and auto left and right, so nice and centered. Okay, and then the main article part is going to go on the left. We'll sort out the floating and everything else a bit later on, but we'll start with an H2. We've already used H1, so we'll have H2, and that will be our technology. So let's just have a quick look and see how that looks. Okay, fine, definitely a little bit out of position there, but that can be easily changed. So H2, there's only one of them, so we don't need to give it a particular class. We want it to be definitely not bold, a bit smaller, and then red underlined. So we'll have font weight normal, margin top, let's try 40 pixels, and let's try a font size of 20 pixels. See how that looks. Okay, pretty good. So that's aligned right to the left, which is what we want. Yep, we want it aligned with the news. Now we want to achieve this red underline here, but I think it's not actually an underline. It looks more to me like a border. So I'm going to grab the color first off, which I think is actually the same color as we've used before, that dark red. And then it looks quite thick, so maybe 4 pixels. Let's try border bottom 4px solid, whoops, not quite red, but that color there with a hash in front of it. Let's take a look. All right, so that's pretty good. I think it's maybe a little bit too thick. Let's try 2 pixels. Okay, that looks a lot better. And let's set the width then of the H2. So that it's about the right size. All right, nearly there. Okay. There we go. Great. So now we've got our technology. Let's have our, this is going to be our H3 link, and this is going to be our title. So it's H3, it's a link. We don't care where it goes, and there's the content. So let's have a little look how it seems. Okay, I quite like the spacing, that's about right. We need definitely different colors, but it's roughly in the right place. I think we need it to be a little bit larger as well. So let's take out H3A, because we're styling a link within H3, and we definitely want the color to be black. We want the font size to be around, let's try 20 pixels, see how that looks. I think we could go a bit bigger than that. Okay, I like that. I think that's about right. And we want to get rid of that underline. So text decoration, none. Okay. Excellent. And we also want to make sure that it goes to that blue on the hover. So let's get the right color. Difficult to do at that width. Come on, it's definitely not behaving today, but maybe I can persuade it. No, it's not happy about that. Okay, let's see if I can use the inspector. So right click or command click, sorry, and inspect. And then it might give us the hover color if we're lucky. There we go. I think that's it there. So let's copy that. It's called faux block link hover, presumably. So that looks promising. Okay, so we're going to style that using H3A and then hover. And we want it to be the same as above, but with that particular color. Wonderful. Okay, storming along. All right, now we've got this part down the left. So I think we can use a nice paragraph for that. I want to try and copy it without clicking on the link. Okay, I can't do that, so I'm going to inspect it and copy it from the code. So I think it's here in buzzard body, buzzard summary. There we go. I'll select that. And then let's pop that in. So we're still in main article here. I think we need a div. I'll call it article summary. And then the code, let's have a look. Great. I wonder if we can get it to tell us the color. So I'm going to click on the arrow there and then find the bit that I want. See if I can extract the color. So that part there, and let's go for computed, and I think that's the color. No, not quite. There we go. Yeah, it is the same. So 5A, 5A, 5A. I think the actual size looks about right to me. So article summary. There we go. Is color. Is that. Wonderful. Now we want to change the width a little there. So let's reduce the width to, let's try 200 pixels, see how that looks. That put. We could go a little bit wider, maybe 220. Great. I think that's close enough. I think the spacing of their font is a little wider than ours, but I think we can live with that. Okay, and then underneath we've got this little timer here. I can't right click and download it, so I'll need to a screen grab. So same as usual, let's go back and grab it. There it is. I'll call it clock. Copy it with Command C or Control C and paste it into images. There we go. So we just need the clock and then the date and then a line and then technology. Easy. So I'll do that as a paragraph. And then we'll have a new paragraph for our clock. Images / clock.png. And then our date, which was currently the 19th of January 2016. And I'll see what happens. I'll try writing a pipe, which should be over to the right of your keyboard near the enter button. We'll see if that looks right. I think it might do, but we might have to use a margin there if it's too narrow. And then we've got a link which says technology. Okay, that looks pretty good. Definitely need a bit of styling there. But we can do that without any new classes, I think. So this is all within article summary. So we can have article summary and then image. There's only one of those, and that's the clock. So let's change the height to, let's try 15 pixels. Great. I think that's just about right. And I want to move it down slightly. It's a little bit high up. So let's use a relative position. And top. Not much. Let's try 3 pixels. Up, too much. 2 pixels. Great. Okay, perfect. Now, of course, we have a problem because our width was too narrow. So let's increase the width of article summary a little bit so that it can bring in the bottom part as well. That's great. Okay, and then let's style our link. So what color do we want it to be first off? It's the same red as the other red, I think, and then on hover it goes the same blue, by the looks of it, as the header up there. So let's take off the underline first. So text decoration, none. And then color, let's find that red. It was the same as the bottom border on the H2, so that number should do it. Let's have a look. Wonderful. And then we just need to change the hover, which is actually going to be the same as that. But instead of H3, we want article summary A. Hover. So now when we hover, it goes blue. Brilliant. I don't quite like my hyphen though. I don't think it looks as good as that does. So it's going to be slightly trickier than just putting in a pipe, but not to worry. Let's make it a left border on the technology link. So border left is definitely 1 pixel. Solid, and I think it's the same grey as the grey up here. So let's scroll up and find that. That was our 6 C's. So pop that in there. Have a look. Okay, so yeah, that looks a lot better. But we need to add in a little bit of padding. Let's try 10px. Okay, yeah, that looks right, but it's now too big. Let's see if it's still too big after we've done that. Okay, it's not, but we now need to add padding to that bit there. So let's put a span with an ID of date. And that just means that we can put a little bit of padding to the right of it so that the border there isn't flush with the 2016. So our date, we want padding right. Let's have the same as what we had for the technology link, 10px. Okay, I think that looks great, but we do now need to make our article summary div a little wider. Beautiful. Okay, I'm very happy with all of that. Now all we need to add for this part is the image here. So I'm going to control click or right click, and I can't even do it there. Nope, so the image is in the CSS somewhere. We could figure it out, but it's probably easier, or at least quicker, to just screenshot it. Remember, if you can't do that for any reason, then just grab it from the download in the next video. Okay, there it is. I'll call it main article image, and then we'll copy that straight into our images folder. Lovely. Get rid of that. So this is going to be to the right of this section here, so we're going to want to float all of that left. So let's make that happen. I think what we'll do is underneath technology, because technology goes all the way across, so we'll create a new div to contain the article there. Then that's the bit that can float left for us. So we'll leave technology as is, and then we'll have a div with an ID of article container. Then that can go there, and we'll indent everything inside that. Lovely. So article container needs to have a certain width, and it needs to float left as well, and so does article summary. So let's just make that happen. So article summary already has a fixed width, so let's make it float left. And then article container we want that to float left, and we want a fixed width. Let's go for maybe 600 pixels. It's going to be a bit more than half. Okay, just make sure we haven't ruined anything too much there. Yep, that looks fine. Got a bit more spacing than we had before, but that might actually work out better. Let's put everything else in and see. So then to the right of article summary, we're going to have the image. That's all we have here, so let's just put it straight in. Main article image, there it is. And let's just see how it looks without any styling at all. Whee! A little bit too big. So I'll give it an ID of main article image. And then let's edit it up here. So the main thing we need to do is reduce the width. Let's try 300 pixels. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. Okay, I'm happy with that. I think it's a bit bigger in real life. So let's go for 400 pixels. Okay, that's now too big for the container, but that's all right. We can make the container a bit wider. Okay, I think that looks good. Maybe not exactly the same size, but close enough. I'd like to see a little bit more gap between the image and the text down there. So let's give it a little margin left of maybe 20 pixels. Okay. You might have guessed that was going to happen. Let's give that another 20 pixels. Great. So that looks pretty awesome to me. The only thing I want to add are these two links down here, a little line there, and then our border to the right there. Okay, so let's start our way down here. So that one is actually quite easy to put in. We can use a horizontal rule, and we'll do this after the technology link. So here, so horizontal rule, and I think we should give it an ID. I'll call it article HR. So the main thing we need to change is the color and the width. So the color is going to be the same as this red in technology, which I believe was that code there. And then let's go for a width of 50 pixels. See how that looks. Excellent. Couple of minor issues there. It's centered rather than left aligned, and it's not actually red. So let's have a look and see if we can fix those. Let's look at how we might align an HR first off. Okay, so we can add in align equals left into the HR itself. Let's try that out. Okay, that solved that problem. And let's see if we can see what's wrong. Changing the color of an HR element. Yep, so setting the color as we've had doesn't work. Okay, so I think we need to use border color instead of color for the HR. So let's set it as border top, as they've done there. So 1px solid, and then that. Excellent. So now it looks a lot like the one. If we get it aligned nicely in the real thing. Wonderful. Okay, I'm just going to copy those two links. So those links are pretty similar to the technology link, but they're black rather than red. Shouldn't be a problem. Let's pop them in here. So a href is empty again. Close A. I think we'll put them in separate paragraphs as well. And then let's just copy and paste that for the second link too. Okay, fine, but they're inheriting those styles as well. I think because this is a more unique link than this one, we should actually give this an ID. Even though we didn't need to before. So ID equals, let's call it a topic link, because it seems to be linking to technology, which is the topic that we're looking at. And then we want to put all of this into topic link. There we go. So that now works fine. We just need to style these. So I think we'll give them a class of their own as well. I'll just call them article link. There we go. And we don't need a lot of styling for them, but we need to set the color to black. And we need to set the text decoration to none. We've already got the right coloring on the hover. Brilliant. So I think that's close enough. We now just need to add the border on the right there, which is our classic 1px solid grey. We're familiar with that by now. And we're going to add that to the article container. So border right is going to 1px solid, and can we find the right color? It's the topic link. There it is. Oh no, the border left link color. There we go. So article container 1px solid and then that color. Okay, looks very good, but of course it needs to be spread out a little bit. So let's add a bit of padding. Try 20 pixels. Wonderful. There we go. So we're pretty darn close now. We've got our left main block added. So all that remains is to add our watch listen section down here on the right. Excellent. So well done for staying with me. We've done a lot of work here and we're almost finished. So we've got our nice top bar at the top, then we've got our menu bar in 2 shades of red, and then we've got our main article content over here. All we need left now is the section on the right, watch/listen. So that should be fairly trivial. Nothing too tricky in there, just a couple of images and some links. So if you have done this whole thing by watching me, then that's great, but why not take the opportunity to do this last bit on your own? There really is nothing fancy there. It's all pretty straightforward. So give it a shot if you feel you might be able to. Okay, so let's start at the top. Watch/listen is what we're after. And we'll want to do that in a new div. So we're still inside any div, I'm not too sure. You can see the page container. Yes, the page container was the full 1000 pixels. So this is going to be our watch and listen div. And I'll use an H4 here just for fun. Watch/listen. So we'll have a quick look just to remind ourselves what style we're going for. Okay, so pretty big, black, but probably not bold. Let's take a look. All right, so not too bad. I think one thing I'm going to do is temporarily clear the floats so that I can see it again without having to change everything. It's probably a good idea to clear them before the div that I want to appear underneath. There we go. So let's do a little bit of styling there. First off, we want to style watch listen. I think all we need is a bit of padding or possibly margin on the left. That will do for now. Doesn't really matter which we choose. Let's pop in 20 pixels. There we go. And then only one H4. So let's have font weight is normal, but font size is maybe 20 pixels. Try that. That looks about right to me. Unfortunately, we are going to have to make this bigger and smaller. Okay, that looks great. So let's get these images. One. I think I'm going to get all 3 in one go. There we go. So let's copy those over. We'll have article 1, article 2, and article 3. Go, copy them as before, and then just pop them in our images folder. Wonderful. Okay, so let's get the image up first off. So underneath our H4, we're going to have first off our image. So it's going to have an src of images / article 1. And we can do this, we can style these all the same, can we? Come to think of it, we're going to have this image here as well. So we can't just use all the images inside watch-listen. So let's give it a special class. I'll call it article side image. Just because I think I might have used article image before. I'm not sure. So article side image, we definitely want it to float left. And we're going to want to play with the size a little bit, I suspect, yep, because that's pretty big. So let's try a width of maybe 70 pixels. A little bit small. Let's try out 90, see how it looks. Okay, then we've got our text there, which I can't copy, so there we go. If I control click or right click, that lets me copy it. So it's a link again, but we don't really care where it goes. But we want it to be definitely black, possibly bold, and pretty big. So not very much like that. All the links here are going to be the same, so rather than giving it a separate class, let's keep our code lean and mean and just style it using watch-listen A. Or come to think of it, we're going to have separate style links there, so maybe we should give it a class. Bit messy, but probably slightly easier to understand. So watch-listen-link. Okay, so we definitely want no underlining. We want the color to be black. We'll try making the font weight bold and the font size, let's try out 18 pixels. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. We then want to make it go blue on the hover, which we've done before. There we go. So always copy and paste if you can. Fewer chances of you making mistakes. Although it looks like I have made a mistake. So maybe I just need watch-listen link on hover. There we go. That's better. Because of course it's not an A within watch-listen-link. It is watch-listen-link. Okay, we want a bit of a gap between the image and our headline as well. So I think we'll do that as a margin right on the image itself. There we go. That looks nice. And let's set the width of our watch-listen div now so that that wraps up nicely. So maybe 300 pixels. Backs, let's give it a little bit more if we can. Okay, we'll try that out and see if we've got room to fit that in there. I think we have. Okay, so now we've just got the date, which is exactly the same as what we had over here. So we should be able to copy and paste our code, which would be nice. Let's have a look. So here we go. Let's put that inside a paragraph tag. And then we can have another paragraph tag. So we've got our clock image. Same as before, but we're going to need some styling there. So let's create a class of clock so that we can steal the styling that we had before and make it not limited to images inside whatever we called that bit. The article container, I think. Oh no, the article summary. There we go. So instead of article summary image, we're now going to have clock. That shouldn't change anything over there. Yep. It'll just allow us to use it in more than one place. Okay, so here we go. We've got our clock. Now we've got an ID of date. We're going to want to use that more than once now, so let's change it from an ID to a class. And then I'm going to use Command F or Control F on Windows to find .date. Ah, no, because it's not .date yet, it's hash date, and we want to change that to .date. Okay, let's have a look. Brilliant. Now we don't actually want the technology this time, but we will want it later on. So let's keep it in for now. One thing you might have noticed is this technology actually goes below the image, but it doesn't wrap round. So what we're going to need to do is create a div here on the right so that it doesn't wrap as it's doing at the moment underneath the image, like that there. While I'm looking at that as well, I think we might need to get rid of a little bit of padding. Oh no, that's okay, it's slightly lower down. That's fine. Okay, so let's create a div around everything to the right of the image. So I'll just call this side article. And then all of this can be indented. And then we want side article. In fact, I don't know if we actually need any styles at all. Yeah, we certainly need something. Let's give it a float of right and a fixed width. All right, we're getting there, but let's move that up a little bit. Let's try 15 pixels. Oh, yep, up, not down. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Before we add all the others, let's just get rid of our clear so that it should now be floating right, but it's not, I suspect. It's because it's too wide. So let's have a look. Let's change that to 150 pixels first. Okay, not quite. Let's take out watch listen. Change the width of that. Okay, that's closer. Okay, let's add a float. Right, just to definitely get it up there. Okay, brilliant. So now we're in the right place. We just need to get our widths sorted out. Okay, that's slightly too wide. Still slightly too wide. Okay, there we go. So now we're in position. I think we can make our side article part a little bit wider. There we go. Move it up a touch more. So let's just get the colouring right here. We want the span with a class of date. So Command F and search for .date to get right there. And I think it's that colour that we want, so same as the article summary. That's great. And now here we want that to appear just on its own. And then if we've got a link, as we have in the second one, we want a pipe there or a bit of border, and then our technology on the next line. So the way I'll do that is we'll break our floats or clear our floats there, and then copy all of this to get a new article. Just have a look. Okay, very nice. So now we can get rid of the topic link from the top one. There we go. So that's just 19th of January 2016 now. And then we need to edit our code so that this technology appears on the next line. But we also want the border to appear on the right, which is a bit of a pain because we've put the border on the left of the technology link. So let's add another class to the link saying no border, and we'll add another class to the span saying border right. And we'll use those to override the existing classes. So for no border, we want border left to be none. And let's just check. We might need an important there. Note that's achieved it in itself. But it has taken us back to the original. But that's okay. That's highlighted an error actually. This should be class is topic link and no border. And that should be the same then up here. Yes, so that should be a class of topic link because we're now using it more than once. So let's find our topic link. So Command or Control F and then #to takes us almost there. Topic link, there we go. So that's now a class. There we go, that's better. So we've got the class without the border. We also don't want the padding there anymore either. So in our no border class, let's get rid of that padding. Excellent. And then let's add the border in to the right of the span. So this is the border right class now. And that's going to be the same as this one, but on the right. In fact, I think it's already got a padding right of 10, so that should be okay. Let's have a look. Okay, that's great. We do really want those to be on separate lines though. So let's see if we can put in a line break in between them. Wonderful. All right. That looks pretty good. So now it's just a matter of updating. There we go. The titles and the images for the other articles. Let's get rid of that. And so that's going to be article 2. And then we're going to want to clear all of that again. and create another side article, article 3, copy the content there, paste that in, get rid of that video, and finally article 4, and what is a VPN service? Very good question. Okay, and I think one of those, yep, has a different topic. So the second one is science and environment, not technology, or the third one, sorry. Okay, let's have a look. And there they are. Oh, maybe I only copied 3 article images. That's fine. We'll stop at the 3. That was the threshold that we wanted to go down to anyway. And there we go. I'm sure the perfectionists amongst you, or the future web designers, will find lots of small ways to improve that and get it even closer to the original. But I think, to the layman's eye, there's not much to obviously see the difference. So congratulations. I hope you managed to do a good chunk of it yourself. But even if you've just followed along with the videos, I hope you've learned a great deal and see how you can take the CSS knowledge that you've learned in this section and create a world-class website. For many of you, that was probably the biggest coding challenge you've ever had. So well done once again for making it to the end. Go and have a nice cup of tea and a couple of chocolate digestives, and then come back to do some real coding with JavaScript in the next section.